Thank you very much. It's interesting how times change. If I told you 2 weeks ago that I was the son of an Argentine, you would have said, gee, they can play good football. This morning, you think something a bit more like tres, dos, uno, poof. No pagamos la deuda. We're not paying the debt. My father has taken on South African citizenship, I'm delighted to say. His son probably supports Argentina football more enthusiastically than he does. He left a country having married an English woman in the late 60s in some serious difficulties. It's just interesting looking at the passage of time and asking yourself how you avoid making the sorts of errors that we can make when, like that farmer, we're tempted to ask for daily weather forecasts when we've just bought a farm. I need to stick to my script. I'm delighted to be here. It's a great honor and a privilege to stand on this platform and be associated with this company. My challenge is to stick to what I came to bring to you. You might find that you can tempt me to give a view on one or two of the things that have come through. You might find it even gets sprinkled into the prepared presentation. How do you bring something different to a presentation on retirement investments in this country? Well, what I've done is I've done a little bit of homework. I've read a book and I've read a paper. And I'm not asking you to read them. I'm not telling you not to read them. What I have done, though, is I've asked myself, well, what can we learn from them? What sage advice can they give to us? And I deliberately chose publications that were not from this country. In fact, they're both American. The benefits of the American world, if you're not an American, is that they have to do it all themselves. It's part of the way they do retirement. And so they're prone to a lot of errors in doing so. America, you may not know, has one of the lowest retirement savings rates in the world. That's what happens when you tell people to do it themselves. Americans are prone to tremendous errors, some of which, okay, here it comes, we've heard about already. But there are some interesting lessons that come out of that. So what I'm going to do is take us through a little path, tell you a little bit about them, and then hopefully land with some helpful advice. What am I not going to give you? Well, I'm not going to give you top tips for retirement savings. There's some decent books. There's some good journalists out there. Listen to what they say. And you won't confuse me with Maya Fisher-French, I'm sure. I'm not going to give you a summary of everybody else's smart thinking. That would be unfair, because it might cover stuff like, buy a lifetime annuity in your mid-70s. Make sure that your exposure to equities when you retire is, say, 50%. Stay with the market. If I go on long enough, I'm going to begin contradicting myself. Well, that's because that smart thinking sometimes contradicts itself. And it's also because what passes as smart thinking is it's not so smart. Some of the smart thinking is a little bit like, well, put your money with me and I'll be okay. So we have to be careful about what we take as smart thinking. But the real problem is that we're not economic units. We're not, as we learnt in Economics 101, independent, intelligent, rational, identical units with the same access to cost-free information. I don't know, whatever the economists tell us we do. And yet so much of the theories are built on these people over here. Sorry, these people over here. I can see them over here. Do you want to come and look at them? These people in front of you. That's not who we are. We are We are people whose lives and paths are unique. We have different aspirations. We have different income, different expenditure, different hopes, different risks, different attitudes to our risks. We are going to have different paths as we go through life. We are different. And so we shouldn't be following the same advice. We shouldn't be following the same mantras. But most importantly, we only have one chance. And the real problem with our environment today is that we carry the can. So this talk is going to be to you as trustees, to you as investment advisors, to you as experts, and you know what I mean when I say experts. It's sometimes respectfully. But it's also to you as individuals, because I think even you as trustees you won't forget, I'm sure, that you're an individual as well. You're an individual with a package, a financial portfolio that I hope is black rather than red right now, but a package of aspirations. You may have a vehicle parked out there. It's a complex combination. So we might wonder whether anybody really cares anymore. DC members bear the risk. What sort of risk? Investment risk, interest rate risk. They even bear operational risk. They bear liquidity risk. They bear credit risk because of the entities in which their funds are invested. Do you really expect you as a member to have thought through the creditworthiness of the institutions in which you're invested? Well, you are exposed to that risk. Employers are no longer the funders of last resort. I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but that's the truth. The power lies in theory with the trustee, but in practice with the financial services industry, unless you take it back. And the problem is that advice from the industry is not entirely trustworthy. And Stephen gave us some great evidence of that. He spoke about the institutional advice. I can speak a little bit about the individual advice. The fact is that few financial advisors have the right incentives even to care, because they're seldom remunerated on the quality of advice. And in fact, they are not paid primarily by the individual that they advise. That doesn't sound right to me. They're paid by the entity whose products are sold to that individual. You've got a deeply flawed system. And we have some brave policymakers looking to change that system. And strength to them. So let's look at the first one. Running out of money before you run out of time, the big retirement risk, by Erin Botsford, who, if I remember correctly, is a Texas-based financial advisor. She writes quite personably. She's been through some big challenges herself. Her early life was framed by a personal tragedy in the family and the fact that no provision had been made. And she swept floors and waited on tables for quite some time, which is a pretty good thing, I'm inclined to say. There are not many actuaries who walk the streets of Buenos Aires for 6 weeks in their early life, sending something like 110 letters and getting 7 interviews and nowhere near a job. But I dare say it did me a little bit of good. We make many mistakes in times of prosperity, but I think we're less likely to make those mistakes if we went through some times of adversity as well. So let's look at what Erin tells us, or frankly what she tells America, because it is a little bit US-centric. She has a good core message. Take control of your retirement planning. Take control of your retirement planning and plan ahead with a goal in mind. And she does this really quite practically and quite helpfully. She says, and maybe she's writing to people within 10 years of retirement, because this will be quite difficult for those of us who are a little bit further. I'm 44, so I'm about 30 years from retirement. No, there's nothing wrong with my arithmetic. That's my life plan. What she does is she actually invites these readers to literally to plan for their expenditure in retirement, and not just vaguely, I'm earning 60K, I'd like to have 40K. No, literally, what do you want and what is it going to cost? And more than that, what do you really need? I need food, I need a roof over my head. And what do you want? I'd like an annual holiday. And what do you really aspire to? Well, I'd like to be able to send my kids and my grandkids to Harvard. And what's really at the top of the pyramid? Well, I'd like to give. I'd like to support this cause or something like that. And that's good. And I don't think many of us get that sort of advice. I don't think many of us get that kind of breakdown. All right, you got to eat. Do you have to be able to support that philanthropic effort? No. You've got to be able to eat, but you don't have to be able to do that. But if we plan, we might be able to take you through that. What if your international holiday were a local holiday? That's good advice. That's really good. Another part of her core message is to take care accepting the wisdom of, excuse me, I don't often do this, experts. Okay. Take care accepting the wisdom of experts, she says, because sometimes they are experts indeed, but they allow their positions to affect the integrity of their advice. And sometimes their core message is indeed, leave your money with me and I'll be okay. And then another good part of her message is the investment of assets in retirement for income. For income. You know what so many people forget? That when they retire, there's no income. We can be so short-sighted in our approach to our planning that we forget that the one big thing that's different tomorrow to today is that we don't have an income. And that short-sightedness leads a lot of retired people into the need to find an income, which, by the way, is not a bad thing, but maybe you should have planned for that in the first place, because we have a great deal to benefit from the activities, income-earning activities of our elderly citizens. What she reminds us is that we need to invest for an income in retirement. Now, what the US doesn't have as well is a good annuity market. The UK appears absolutely intent on destroying a good annuity market. We have a good annuity market. You can convert capital to income, and you can ensure that that income is guaranteed for life. Again, we're short-sighted. Our fear is that we die tomorrow and that the money disappears. Well, what are you going to do if you live forever and the money has disappeared by the time you're halfway through the period to forever? So think about your income. Then she has, as I say, this great advice on distinguishing needs from wants and hopes. And then she gives a good explanation of the characteristics of asset classes. And skipping ahead a little bit to one of my conclusions, we do this so badly, so badly, so badly. Take the average well-off South African, well-off, and ask them for a simple breakdown of the essential characteristics from a risk and return and income and tax perspective of 6 asset classes. They're going to fail. They're going to fail. One of the benefits of this DIY world in the States is that Americans understand. Okay, now one of the problems of that so-called understanding is their overconfidence in their own understanding, and I'll come to that as well. But it's a good explanation of the characteristics of asset classes. And it does lead to one of my conclusions. Let's turn to some of the downsides of her advice. I think she's too pessimistic on equities. And she has lots of stories, and she tells the wonderful story of the luck involved in equities. The man who started working in December 73 and the next man who started working in June 74, and they both saved for 40 years in Bogard's index funds, and one of them was so much better off than the other because of the timing. Yes, you saw the wiggles in the charts, but that doesn't mean equities are wrong, bad, that they're risky and you need to avoid them. In fact, equities are a good match for your, excuse the technical word, I'll explain it to you in a moment, liabilities. Liabilities. There are a lot of bad things that actuaries learn, and there are a lot of bad habits that they develop, like he's still sitting there, a tendency towards complexity. I completely agree, and complexity brings cost, yes. But one of the things we learn is that you invest your assets to match your liabilities. And you have liabilities. You have current liabilities, you have debts that you need to pay now, and you have long-term liabilities. And we've spoken about those liabilities. Some of them you call needs, and some of them you call wants, and some of them you call aspirations. But they're all liabilities. Get your assets to match your liabilities. Equities are a good match to your liabilities. If you're planning to retire in this country, your expenditure will be in South African rands. The equity is the driver of the economy. You need to invest in equities. That just adds to the advice that Stephen has already given to you. Of course, you need to take care of the volatility, and there are many good ways to manage that. So I think she's a little bit hard on equities. Was it a great book? No. Was it a good book? Yeah. Was it an interesting book? Very much so. I felt as if I was reading a little bit of US investment culture. I felt that I was getting an insight into the what people do and the mistakes that they make, and I thought she did a pretty good job. This is different. This is a paper. It was written in the Financial Analyst Journal, which is the journal of the CFA Institute. Notwithstanding its highfalutin publication, it's pretty readable. It's pretty good. Written by Sexar and Siegel, big names. They did a good job. And there's another good core message, and the core message is take responsibility. I know this first line is more than just a little bit scary, but it is at the core of the message. Consider your DC savings the way an actuary would a DB fund. Now, you do not want to learn to think like an actuary. Okay, that's accepted. But let's face it, you carry the can. So you don't have any choice but to begin to think the way an actuary may think for a DB fund. And so they suggest that you work out your liabilities and you discount them, you accumulate your assets on the basis of an economically sound plan, and you decumulate in old age to preserve the value of longevity pooling. And again, they come up with a solution that is outside of, on the decumulation, outside of a good annuity market. So you have some advantages. But they also add that you need to be prepared to make personal fiscal adjustments, the way a country does, the way a defined benefit fund does, the way any big organization does. It has a plan, and then as it gets pushed by the winds, it changes the sails. It makes a new plan. It's helpful. It's a helpful paper, but to be honest, I think it's a little bit unrealistic. Let's look at how it would work in practice. Here's a high school teacher in Columbus, Ohio. I don't have anything in particular in favor of Columbus, Ohio, except I'm following their example. And I redid the models to make sure that I agreed with their numbers. Can't hold back the actuary sometimes. Let's assume that this teacher starts at 22 and has 40 years of work. Now, what I like about what I'm going to show you is that you've probably never seen thinking like this before. And that's why it's good to read from outside of a country, outside of a culture, into and think whether it might apply to us here. So they take the view that to be sure, you need to be conservative of investment returns, so they use real net investment returns of zero. Now, the charges in this country are pretty jolly high, but even so, I think a net investment return of zero is unduly conservative. Okay. It's a good provider who manages to take away all of your positive investment returns. Some of them try. The nice thing about their position is that you probably never know if they did, because it's so complex, you won't be able to see it. I recently saw, thanks to a gentleman in the audience who sent it to me, a very brave full disclosure of a pretty simple product. It was a preservation fund in a large institution that offered you access to just three equity alternatives. It ran for 2 or 3 pages. It used technical terms. I listed them because I was writing for something. I think I listed 15 or 20 technical terms. it was remarkable. But what was remarkable about it is that it was the most honest disclosure that I have seen in this country. And all it did was describe how enormously complex our environment is. And that was for a simple combination of 3 equity funds. I get distracted. What this person has done is recognized that in real terms, their human capital growth, what's your human capital? Your ability to earn. Your human capital growth will be positive for a while. Younger people tend to grow in their income more rapidly than those of us who are past the kind of midlife, I nearly said crisis, zone. Where we didn't you love that picture of the ocean? Just swim on, that's just something else. People say I'm right in the crisis. And then to recognize that in the second half of their lives, they probably, their human capital growth will tail off. Maybe you do need to call it capital when you're getting older. I don't know how she came up with 3.11 or 0.74, but interesting part of the plan. And then she says, you know what, I can't save more than 10%. That's a realistic start. So she says to herself, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take the opportunity every time I have a salary increase to put a portion of that salary increase into my incremental savings. So I'm saving so much in dollar terms. In those early years, I'm going to get a real salary increase of 3.1%. That which is just inflation is mine. Then of that 3%, part of it I will put into incremental saving. How much of my real salary increases do I need to put into my saving in order to meet my goals? And she's done the homework on meeting the goals, and the numbers will be intuitively right because the goals have been calculated to make sense based on, and this get a bit technical, based on current annuity conversion rates. And here's a little chart that shows her calculations. The accumulated assets go off the scale because we want to be able to see everything else. Note how her income, this is real income, grows and then starts growing a little bit slower as she kind of hits the realization that she's kind of got it as good as she's going to get. That's how it is. Have you ever seen an actuary's projection of salary increases over lifetime? Get used to this. It's the rare that have big increases between 50 and 60. So get used to that. And here are her contributions, and there's the savings rate. Now, I'm going to give you the answer in a moment, but you should be a little bit nervous by where that green line goes on the right-hand side of the chart. It's well over 30%. 30% of her income she's going to need to save. So what she needs to do, she needs to put away a little bit more than a half of her annual increases into her pension saving. She's got a problem. But at least she knows that she's got a problem. And she can calculate it again. So let's use a slightly more realistic real investment return, 2.5%, still an initial savings rate of 10%, still asking if I can only save 10% now, and there is merit in this strategy, by the way, there is merit in this strategy. It's not just that the young can't save, anybody can save. I mean that, anybody can save. It's not just that the young can save. I've just come back from Kigali, Rwanda. Rwanda is a country that is on the move, you would not believe it. Dramatic poverty rates, and we've carried out some research into the demand side. Despite the poverty, people are saying we can and we will save because we understand the benefit of saving. It's a sacrifice today for a benefit tomorrow. So there is merit in starting low, not to buy the car, but to build assets that have endurance. And I'm thinking particularly of the house. Okay, but she says, no, a real investment return of 0 is unrealistic. Let's make it 2.5. What then do I need to do? The chart is similar, but you can see it heading to an endpoint of about 20%, and about a third of the annual real increases should be put into her retirement savings. And we can do it again. I've looked at the numbers to say, well, what if we take an investment return of 4%, and what if we have an initial savings rate of 12? Well, as it happens, 12 is pretty much enough under all of those assumptions. Okay. Now, despite the fact that I nearly let the actuary out of the box, and you could see me getting all excited about this, I have some serious problems with this methodology. The sophistication is beyond the reach of most. You need external information, for example, on the conversion rates of capital to income. And the assumptions are probably unduly conservative. And all of that was premised on the assumption that everything would go as we expected, but it never does. And the reality is that personal fiscal adjustments are unlikely in practice. They're unlikely in practice. And so it becomes, as a paper, quite interesting, some useful thoughts, and I'll lead on to those in a moment, but perhaps a little bit unrealistic. So, I have takeaways for members, and then I have takeaways for trustees. Take personal responsibility. I don't mean be an expert, but I do mean take responsibility. Recognize that all of those people, not all of them, your wife and your children perhaps will still be there, but everybody else won't be there. You take responsibility. You take responsibility for the possibility that your beach house retirement will in fact not happen. You take responsibility for that. You learn along the way. Learn along the way. I'm not recommending these books, but I am recommending the curiosity. Learn. Understand, what is a government bond? Government bond is a debt issued by government. No. Understand it. So should I buy a bond issued by National Treasury, which is free of charge? Understand it. And don't understand it by speaking to your pals at the Braai, because all of them, with respect to your pals, in wanting to look impressive, are spouting out the information provided by the people that you shouldn't be speaking to, the put it with me people. Seek to understand. There's good stuff out there. Learn along the way. And then be careful with your trust. Be careful with your trust. I'm not saying you can't trust anybody. I'm just saying be careful. Be curious. Ask the right questions. Be careful with your trust. If you don't have any questions for me, I've got a little story to tell you, but I'm not going to waste time with a story now. Live for tomorrow. This is Granny's advice. Are you telling me, you're all looking at me and saying, are you telling me, Stephen, you're off your rocker? You got this guy to come here to tell us stuff that our grandmother tells us. Well, yes, do you know why? Because nobody else tells you this. Nobody else tells you this. Everybody else tells you, but you're one of those, okay? Look what we did last year. Look what we did last year. So live for, by the way, on that, care for your trust. Little story. The reason you must ignore investment performance is because, excuse the cliche, it's like the iceberg. And Stephen mentioned it. I think the horse analogy is perfect because we focus on the horse that won. We don't focus on the 9 horses that ran and got forgotten. They cantered through. Did anybody focus on the horse that came 7th? Oh man, it's a great stride. No, the winning horses are already going into the parade and the others are coming through. That's the 9 that ran and didn't make it. What about the 4 that went into the gate and changed their mind as they left the gate? One of them tripped, another one, kind of wouldn't make it and balked and wouldn't go. What about the 24 that were prepared for the gate and were scratched? They didn't make it. Okay, there's a lot of information that is thrown out when it comes to the presentation of performance. Do not overestimate your competence. I mean it. I'm glad you don't have tomatoes ready for you, but please do not overestimate. I've told you to learn, and I've told you to take responsibility, but do not overestimate your competence. And I'm going to illustrate it very briefly like this. Here's a little chart. There are dates along the bottom, and I prepared this chart while I was preparing the slides a few weeks ago, and half of you are saying, oh, gee, you should have sold some time ago. Yep, downward trend. looks a bit dull. Let me give you some additions, some interesting information that goes with it. Yep, we can see the downward trend now. Should have sold. Yeah. But maybe we should buy now. You know what? I can tell you with great confidence, that those trends are not far from a reversal and that they will head upwards in the months to come. Why? Because that chart is the chart of minimum and maximum temperatures recorded at 30 Boulder Road in Johannesburg. Why am I showing you a temperature chart and saying, I can tell you with confidence? Those lines, very impressive, very nice looking lines, eh? What's this? 10-day average. What's this? 30-day average. So that little dip in the 10-day average, what's that? We had a cold spell and it gradually gets into the 10-day average. Why am I showing you this? Because the reality is that we know that although we can't predict every day, we know the trends because we have a scientific model that backs it, that is well established, proven, and you know the best thing about this model? Even I can understand it. Even I know that I don't plan to swim in my swimming pool in June unless I have a very special long-term plan in mind. So here's the mistake. This is the sciences, the physical sciences, okay? You know what? We do the same in the economic sciences. In the economic sciences, we overestimate our competence. We look at a chart like that and go, geez, I'm glad I'm not holding that asset, or maybe I should buy now. It's not a physical science, it's an economic science. It's a voting machine. It's the average of what everybody in the room thinks. It's affected by tres, dos, uno. It's affected by that. Okay? It's an economic science. So don't overestimate your competence. Takeaways for trustees. Take personal responsibility. That's tough. You have no choice. You have a fiduciary responsibility. You must take personal responsibility for everything that you decide for your members, everything you tell them, everything you show them. You have a responsibility for them. And think of this, if you're still going to sleep comfortably at night, they hold the can. They have the risk. Take responsibility. Learn along the way. Learn along the way. Do not accept the services of a consultant that maintain or increase your dependence on them. The door, please, the door. Every contract with every consultant that you sign, trustee, must include significant transfer of knowledge from them to you, systematic. And by the way, if that knowledge is biased, the door. They must give you independent knowledge transfer. You must be richer when they leave than when they come in the room. After 2 hours or 2 days, you must be richer and wiser. Learn along the way. How will you know that it's working? You test them. You're asking them good questions, and your questions are getting better and better all the time. Careful with your trust. Careful with your trust. This is what happens with trust. I'm nearly there. This is a great looking chart. Beautiful, hey? Let me just explain to you. These are made up numbers. Please, this is not financial advice. Like Olana, I'm not qualified to give you financial advice. Okay. These are made up numbers. Here's age along the bottom. Sorry, I feel that I need to show you on both pictures. I'm battling here. This is age along the bottom, and here's your asset portfolio up to 100%. Equities in orange, bonds in gray, a little bit of offshore exposure in yellow, cash in blue. Nice, hey? As you get towards retirement, I'm hoping your retirement age was 65 and not 75 or 55, but at 65, it looks good. You're all set for, a conversion to an annuity and a lump sum. Great, hey? This, friends, is what happens to your member in practice. They walk out the door with their gold watch on, and who do they meet but a friendly financial advisor who does the following to them. screws up their portfolio completely. Now, it was not your responsibility, legally speaking, but it was your responsibility, ethically speaking, to warn that member. I can't walk to the door because they say the sound will go. When you leave that door, this is what you've planned for. Or to say to the member, what do you want when you retire? What do you want? Because if you want a living annuity with equities, then you know what we'll do? We'll keep you in equities up till here. And this is why we'll keep you in equities. Not, this is what we're going to do, trust me. This is why we'll do it for you. So show them. Live for tomorrow. And by now you've seen the pattern. Do not overestimate your competence. Thank you very much.